Hello, welcome back, guys. So in the last video, we were able to create an AWS instance. So I'm going to come here and look at it. We still have it up there running. So here it is, estate app, and we bound an IP address to it and all of that. So we can now use this AWS instance and put our application on it so anyone can navigate to the IP address and actually see our application running on it. What we need to do now is to actually go in and Dockerize our application, so make our application suitable for Docker to run. Basically, that's what I mean by Dockerize. Docker needs certain files and configuration and all of that to know how. So we need to tell Docker, hey, this is how to run our application. So when we go Docker run, Docker knows exactly what to do with that application. So that's what we're going to do now. I'm just going to jump into it. So I'm going to come to my repos here. I have a number of repos. So let's see, where is it? Estate app. And we have estate app here. So I'm just going to right click here and say open with code. And so I have estate app open, right? I'm going to close this too. Collapse all of this. And then first thing I want to do, I want to come into my source folder and I'm going to add a file. I'll just click on source folder and I'm going to add a file, and I'll call this file docker-compose.yml. Now when I try to use Docker Compose to write a project, Docker Compose looks for this file. I'm going to start this file from saying version. So I need to tell Docker Compose what version of YAML this file is. I'll call this version 3.8, and that's the only thing I'll leave here now. I'm going to come into the web project too, and I'm going to add another file here. So I'll say new file, not new C# class, new file. I'll name this Docker file. Awesome. Now, a lot of the things we need to add into these files are boilerplates, right? So for a lot of projects, they're going to be the same. So I won't spend too much time typing it out. I have a different project that I already used a Docker file for. So I'm just going to copy it here and tell you what things to change. And you're always free. You can pause the video and follow along with me, or you can go into the repository, because I'm going to push this to the repository after this video and pick this file. But this is what we're doing. We're telling Docker that, hey, we're going to use a .NET image, so we need to run this application within a .NET image. If you remember, we did not install .NET on our server, but on our own local machine, we need to install .NET for it to run. Now, that's the magic of Docker. We don't have to have .NET installed on that server. We can simply install .NET inside of our container, and our application will run on that server. That's the beautiful thing with that server. Now, workdir.app, this is standard where you're telling Docker which folder to work in. Expose needs to be the port of our application. Now, I know that our application runs on port 5001 and port 5000. So I'll say expose these two ports, and then next thing I'll switch to I have my data project here. So luckily this is a project that had this Docker file is from a project that had two projects too. So if you Dockerizing a project that doesn't have two projects, you probably don't need these extra lines. So I'm going to switch my work there to estate app.data. I'm doing the data project first, estate app.data, and then I'm going to copy the CS proj. So this command says, hey, copy the CS project file from estate app.data. Copy the CS proj file from estate app.data, so this, into my container, and I do that. And next I'm going to say, hey, copy everything else. And this might so there are ways this might make your image considerably larger. There are ways of making your image really small. Well, since you're doing Docker for the first time, let's just keep things simple. Next thing, I'm going to switch from estate app.data into my web project, estate app.web. So I say, hey, go into this folder, and I'll say, hey, copy the CS proj for web state-app.web, and then run .NET restore. So I'm doing all of this thing in the container. After doing .NET restore, I'm going to copy every other thing, and then I'm going to run .NET publish to publish the app. Next, I'm going to, I know I'm publishing it to a folder called out. I was in this folder, I published it to a folder called out, so I know that my executable is located in state-app.web/out, and then I know that my executable is named state-app.web.dll, and that's my Docker file really. So first of all, we tell, if we're doing a Node.js project, we'll tell Docker to use a Node.js base image or run this application within Node.js. So this will change. This is the ports, our application ports. We're copying in the data project, we're copying the CS proj, same thing. We do a .NET restore, we copy in the web project files, and then we just build our app. Docker is a bit more complicated, but this is just to get you to use Docker, to know how to deploy your ASP.NET Core application with Docker. Since this is not a Docker course, we won't do a deep dive. We're simply going to use it. But as we use it, I'm going to explain the relevant parts for you. So this is our Docker file, right? And our Docker file is ready. Next thing is our Docker compose file. Now, Docker is declarative, so YAML is declarative. All we need to do is to tell Docker, hey Docker, we're going to need a database for this project, and this is where you can find the database, and we're going to need this. Maybe let's say we're doing keychain, we can tell Docker, hey, we're going to need keychain, and this is where you can find keychain, and all of that. And after declaring all the things we need, notice that I said declare, I didn't say install. Now, the way we were doing things, we're installing things and using them. So we went to install SQL Server, localDB, and we used it. Now we're declaring that, hey, we're going to need a database, and we don't install. Docker goes away and does that install for us. And using declarations like this can be very helpful, because then I can take this Docker file to any system and just run, hey, Docker, run this application, and Docker says, okay, let me look at my compose file. What are the things I need? And Docker installs them for us. We don't have to go downloading things or configuring things. We can do all of that right within Docker. And that's one of the reasons I like this kind of development. So in fact, before we started this course, I did not have a database installed on my system because I always used Docker. So the next thing is the Docker file. This looks really daunting, but it's really not that big a deal. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this whole section, and I'll explain what it does. But before we do that, I should probably add a network here. So I'll say networks, and I'll create a new network and call it, what's the name of this app? Estate App Network. And having a network like this allows all the services in my Docker file to talk to each other. So it allows my application to be able to talk to SQL Server, which is the database, because once applications are on the same network, they can talk to each other. Next, I'm going to come in here. So let's leave networks. Next, I'm going to come in here and say services. Now, this is the meat. These are the services we want Docker to run. First one is SQL Server, which is a database. Now, notice we didn't install a database on our virtual machine 2. That is because when we run Docker is going to automatically go in and pull a database for us. Notice that I changed the password and I set restart to always. So if for any reason this database goes down, Docker is going to automatically restart it for us, and within seconds really. The next service we need is our estate app, or let's just name this web. So the next service we need is web, and I'm just going to pick, so I don't spend a lot of time typing this. I'm just going to pick from an existing Docker file that I have, and I'm just going to put it here and make the changes. So I have a second service here. I'm going to call this web. Notice I have this container name here. This is important. Container name, I'm going to change this to web2. I'm going to change the image to web. Leave the context to dot. This context means, hey, this file is operating in the source folder. You say, hey, this file is operating in the source folder. Now, for this one, I need to tell it where to find the Docker file. So what's happening here is that Microsoft has created an image, something called an image for SQL Server that Docker can use, right? And this is where it is. In fact, let's pick this and I'll show it to you in the browser. So hopefully if I Google that, I should be able to now. So let's see SQL Server Docker Hub. So here we see, so this is a Microsoft SQL Server image there, and you see the different versions. There's 2017 version, the 2019 version, but we're just using, we're not specifying a version, so it's going to pull the latest one for us. And so Microsoft has already created a container, or an image rather, that we can use to create our own container. So once Docker pulls this image, it knows what exactly to do with it. Great. But for our web project, we don't have a container to pull. That is why we created a Docker file. And then we can give Docker this Docker file. State app.web. We can give Docker this Docker file and say, hey, this is how you should build this container. And then Docker will come into this Docker file and say, okay, I see you're telling me to pull this. I'm going to pull it. I see you want these two ports open. Okay, I'm going to open them. And Docker file will say, okay, I see this is the next thing you want me to do, blah, blah, blah. And Docker is going to build this container for us, build our web container for us from this Docker file. And that is why we're saying, hey, the Docker file you should use is .estateapp/web/Docker file. And then depends on tells Docker that this service needs something to run, because it doesn't make sense for Docker to start this service when the database is not up. So this service is going to fail if the database is not on. So we're simply going to come here and tell Docker that, hey, this service needs a database to run, so don't start this service until you start this service. So it's going to start this service first. Next, we want to change the network to Estate App Network. There are a few other things we need to add here, so I'm just going to jump over to this my file, and I'm going to pick a few more things from here. So for the web, I'm going to add a few more things. So environment, I'm telling it, hey, we're running this application in development, and I'm telling it to do this because I want it to use Kestrel's default certificate. We're going to talk about that later. And then remember the port again. I'm telling it, hey, users need to be able to access my application on this port 5000. So I'm saying, hey, anytime anybody makes a request to port 5000 on my virtual machine, send that request to port 5000 and port 5001 in my application, in my container, because then my application is going to be waiting for connections on port 5001 and port 5000. So that's why I have this port directive here. For SQL Server, I'm going to pick this up and just bring them here. Now what this do is I'm setting a password for my SQL Server instance, and you need to accept the license and terms. And that's it. And then once again, I'm opening a port. So this is the port SQL Server runs on, and I need to tell my application that people need to be able to hit this endpoint. I don't know if I'm forgetting anything, but this is about it for our Docker file. There are a few changes we need to make to our application to make all this work. In our web folder, we need to come to our app settings. And since we're running this, since we're running this in development, Since we're running this in development mode, that means we need to edit our development files. So you probably want to copy these, and it really doesn't matter because your workflow then becomes local. So I'm going to change the server here. The server name is no longer localDB blah blah blah. The server name is just SQL server, and this is not magic. I'll show you why. Server name is SQL server. So I have SQL server here. Why do I have SQL server here? Because I set this container name and the service name to SQL server. So, and because they're on the same network, I can refer to these resources by their names. And suddenly my container name here is SQL server. My connection string, if you use something else here, you want to put that here. Let's see if there's any other thing I need to change. Our connection string needs to change. I forgot to tell you that. So I'm just going to open up another project I have here that has the correct connection string for this. Let's see. Okay, so this is a connection string. So I'm just going to replace this too, and then I'll let you guys look at it so you see exactly what I'm doing. So because we're no longer connecting to a local database, we now need to specify a username and password, and that is why I'm changing the connection string, and the database name has to be correct. I'm just going to Ctrl Z. Okay, so we had estate app.db before, so I'm going to copy this and then Ctrl Y to redo what I did before, and I'll paste in our database name for this project here. So just remember to change the connection string. So let's look at this. We're saying here the server you should connect to is SQL server, the database is estate app.db, and the user is SA, password is dev at 12345. If we come to our Docker Compose file, see we're setting a password dev at 12345. This is where this password came from. Don't forget to set it. Anyways, carrying on, because we're running all of this in a container, we might not necessarily go into our container and run migrations and all of that, because we need to run migration into our container. But luckily, we already anticipated that when we created this. So migrate DB context. So we don't have to go and manually run these migrations ourselves. Immediately our application starts, it's going to check if there's a new migration and it's going to run it automatically for us. So that's pretty cool. I feel like I'm forgetting something important. Let's take a look at our compose file again. We have restart always here too. Okay, let's go ahead and try to run this with Docker and see. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to go back to our source folder, and this is the file folder with Docker compose file. And now I'm just going to say Docker compose up -d, and that's it. I think I hit enter, and then it starts from creating the network, and then it starts building our app. Now look at those instructions we gave it. We told it, hey, this is the image you are going to like. This is the image you're going to use to build our container, and that's what it's doing. It's pulling that, it's downloading that image, and it takes it's on the first time you download this image, it's going to take an amount of data to download, but subsequent time, the good thing is it catches this. So next time you do a build, it won't go and download all of this. It's already downloaded on your system, except you clear it yourself. So let's just let it run this downloads. My network is not very fast today. And while this is happening, Docker is a really cool technology to check out. It used to be a headache to deploy applications, but with things like Docker, it's becoming much easier. And things like Docker and Kubernetes is really the domain of DevOps people and system administrators and all of that, but it doesn't hurt for a software developer to learn all of that. And because I can shake off this feeling of something doesn't feel right, I'm just going to take a look at all our files again, see if there's anything we might be missing. Let's take a look at the startup file. Oh, okay, I think I know what we're missing now. Well, I think I remember not changing something. But let's just let it build so we don't stop the download halfway. Okay, so it has finished downloading this image. Now it's doing all of those things we told it to do. We told you to export port 5001, export port 5000. It did that. We told it to pull in .cfproj and app.data and to build it, and it's doing all of that. In fact, it has done the restore. So it has restored like the way we run on our system, and all of this is running within a container. So it's done. We can, if we go docker ps, we see we have two containers running. We have, I'm going to have to reduce the size of my screen so we can see more stuff. I hope it's not too small. So I'll go, you know what, let me make it a bit bigger. Docker ps, and we see I have a number of resources here. I have my SQL server, and I have my web project. And just to confirm that this SQL Server database actually is valid, it works, I'm going to try to connect to it with SSMS. And if you notice, we have, although our SQL Server instance has been up for about a minute, this one has been up for just about 35 seconds. So I think it's having some issues. We're going to see how to check that later. So this was localDB. This time I no longer want to connect to localDB. I want to connect to localhost. So the way to connect to your SQL Server in running in Docker, change it to localhost. Change your authentication to SQL Server authentication. And I think I already might have my SA and dev at 12345 here. I'm going to connect. And once I go to databases now, the first thing you should notice is, I don't know if I can zoom this in. You see this little panda icon here. Sorry, it's not panda, it's a penguin. And let's go to our browser and I'll show you something. Linux penguin. So we can't see this here. And this is because we're running SQL Server within a Linux image. So it's telling us, so SQL Server is telling us, hey, we know you're running this in a Linux image. If we connect to a normal localDB, we won't have this here. So this is proof that we're actually running another database here. Another thing is I don't have all the other databases on my system here. I have just the estate app DB. And this was created when my application ran. So when I ran these migrations, we actually went in and created that database. And in fact, if we open up the tables and we go to our properties table, it says select top 1000 rows. we see that it has created our tables with all of that, our user tables and all of that. So that's the beautiful thing with Docker. I can literally take this project to another system that has Docker installed. I don't have to install any other thing. I just want Docker compose up D, and it just puts the database there, everything, and my app is ready to go. And that is what we want to do with our server. But now the big question, can we hit this from the browser? So let's go to localhost 5001 as usual, and we see we cannot hit this from the browser. And one good command for you to know is docker logs. Let's first look at SQL Server logs. Docker logs SQL SERVER. So Docker logs SQL Server can tell us what's going on in that container. So we see it initializes the container and all of that. Etc. So but let's look at the other one, Docker logs web. So if there's something going on with your container and you can't in fact, if we see here, we see when the migration ran, it says starting up database estate DB. So when the migration ran, it created this database somewhere and just set some things on it. So all of this happens because of our application. So our application told SQL Server, hey, create this database for me. Now let's go in and look at web. Now the first few times our application tried to, we see a lot of exceptions here, and the first few times our application tried to create that database in SQL Server, it failed because SQL Server wasn't ready yet, and it says a network related or instance specific error occurred. This happens because our application was trying to run those migrations on SQL Server, and SQL Server container wasn't up yet, and it was throwing this error. But because of this flag I put here, let's look at our Docker compose file. Because of this restart flag I put here, each time that error occurs, our application stops and then it starts again. And that's simply going to continue until eventually the app is, what's it called? So until eventually the app is, the SQL Server database is ready, and then it's going to run the migration successfully and start the app. Now we're seeing an error here. It says unable to bind to address, cannot assign requested address, unable to bind to address, cannot assign requested address. And this is happening because of something I forgot to do. That is why we can't access our application. We know that our app is running, but we can't accept it. In fact, it's saying connection refused. So I'm going to clear here. I'm going to say docker ps in my running containers. And now to stop my containers, remember you have to be in the folder with your Docker compose. I can stop them individually with saying docker stop web and docker stop SQL Server. But when I'm working with the Docker compose file, I prefer saying docker compose down, and it just tears down everything. It takes out the database, it takes out the web project, and now when I say docker ps, it's gone. I also won't be able to query my databases again. So if I say execute now, this is not going to work. So it's going to put it to an error and tell me, hey, I can't connect to the database. That's because I've stopped the container. So let's go in and fix that issue. I'm just going to grab the code for that fix for my I have it somewhere here. I have it somewhere in the start. So that's the error. It couldn't connect to that. Anymore. So what I want to do now is just take this web builder.use URL and web builder use kestrels, because now I'm running in a Docker container. I'm going to come over here. Not you. I'm going to close this and come back to my program.cs. I'll just put this here. Now, Kestrel is a web server, and it just knows how to work with it. ASP.NET Core project within Docker, remember to change this. So the HTTPS port is 5001 and the HTTP port is 5000. So HTTPS 5001 and HTTP 5000. This time I should be able to hit my application no problem. So I'm going to go docker compose opt again. If I go docker ps up 3 seconds, I'm just going to wait for a while and just to be sure that this application is up before going to the browser to try to hit it. Hopefully it's going to hit it no problem this time. Oh, that's interesting. Also, we're still restarting. Let's go into it and see what's happening. Docker logs web. Oh, we say it's still trying to connect to the database. So let's give it some time. It's still trying to connect to the database. So let's just give it some time for the database to get ready. Docker ps. Okay, I think it's ready now. Oh, okay, no, it did not connect. That's weird. Cannot assign requested address. Okay, so this is a different issue, and I'm going to show you how to clear it. But it looks like our application is okay. No, our application is not running yet. I'm going to stop everything, and if I remember correctly, we need to come into our properties in the web project, launch settings, and we're going to stop our application from trying to bind to this address. So our application is trying to run on these 2 ports, and I'm simply going to remove this. So that's why I remove the application URLs. I'm going to take this off. If I come to my what's it called? HTTPS, HTTP. I think it all looks okay now. Let's go ahead and run this again. So if I'm clearing everything here, Docker compose up. We're going to give it a while to start the database. Let's see if so no, we're not connected to the database yet. Nope, still not yet. Started 7 seconds ago. Should be connected now, I think. Let's go in and see again. Okay, not connected yet. Still can't bind to these addresses. That's weird. I don't think it's going to work yet because we still can't connect to these addresses. So unable to bind to HTTP, cannot assign requested address. Is something else using those addresses? I don't think so. You know what, let's just docker. Oh, okay. So here's what's going on. I made those changes to my app, but I didn't rebuild my container. So what the thing with Docker is once you've built your container, you have to, and you make changes before you run it, you need to rebuild your container. So let's go docker ps docker compose down, docker compose down, and we need to rebuild it. So these changes have not been injected into the container yet. The container is not aware that we've made these changes. And I'm going to go docker compose up. I think the command is d and build, if I remember. Docker compose up d, and this time I'm telling it to build before starting it. Docker compose d hyphen build. And you see, it just started building web. It didn't start downloading this because it's already downloaded before. But it's going to build it now with our changes. And we just need to be sure that Docker can run well locally. Docker can run our project locally before we push it to server. Before we try to run it on server, let's give it some time for all of those exceptions to pass and get it ready. I think the exceptions usually go away when the database is at about 30 seconds. So yeah, we see. And let's recover up the web. It's still not ready. Okay, now we don't have that whole can't bind, etc., error, and that was because I made this change. We made this change and we didn't rebuild our container. So if you made a change in your code and you want to run your container, remember to run it with the build flag, so build attached. And so then it's aware of those changes. If not, you just spend so much time debugging. And then it says this whole certificate, blah, blah, blah. This is because we're using a local, a development certificate, but it's not a problem. Just hit advanced and continue to local hosts. For some reason, it's not pulling out our style files. Let's see what's going on. Let's go to more tools, developer tools. It's not pulling in the style sheet. Okay, so it's not pulling in any of our style sheets at all. Why is that? So let's go and take a look at our Docker file and see if we're missing anything important there. I'm going to go ahead and close this project and then come back here. So the issue is most likely from this Docker file. Let's look at the things we're copying. We're actually copying everything in our estateapp.web project. We should copy the www root too. So why can't you find it? I'm going to go into my container, so I can go into the container with the command docker. Let's clear this first. I'm going to go into my container and try to verify if those files are there. So I'll go docker exec -it and then the name of the controller and bash. So bash tells it, hey, I want to, and now I'm within the container, just the way I was in that server. Now I'm in this container. Now if I go ls, I see a number of files here. But I don't see my www root. Oh, I see my www root file. It's here. So cd www root. This is the folder that should contain those files. I have my folders here. Assets. So I have all of this in my Docker container. Why can't you find them? Why can't you find them? Let's see. Let's go ahead and inspect this. HTML, CSS. Let's just view page source and see some of these links. So can we get this? Yes, we can get this. Can we get this? Yes, we can. So what's going on? So it's probably not loading all of this because of the certificate. So let's go ahead and let's try running the HTTP version of the app. So not HTTPS. So it's probably giving us all of those errors because this is a problem. Is this might redirect to the HTTPS endpoint exactly. So I expected. Oh, this time it pulls them. That's surprising. Okay. So the styles are here. If you have this is weird, but if you have any of these issues, just let me know. I'm going to go ahead and register. Now I'm registering within the container. I'm just going to say my name is developer Vincent, and my email address, of course, is v1@outlook.com. My password is I don't want that there. My password is dev@12345 as always. Confirm password dev@12345. Then I say register. And I'm registered, I've logged in. I can come to /properties/add, just like before. I can come to /properties too, but remember there's no properties here yet. So we know that, so because we haven't added any property, we don't have any property here. Now let's come and try to refresh our database. This is Stoke. I'm just going to pull up Task Manager and force this to exit. Okay, go away. And while we're waiting for all of that to happen, I'm just going to come back here. I'm going to exit the container. You don't have to come into the container. Once you just do advanced and accept that, where you just try to refresh the page a couple of times, and it's going to bring back the style sheets. I'm going to go back one folder and say git status. Now I can say git add dot git commit dockerized application. I can now push this. Hold on, let me open I can now push this to GitHub. Git push origin dev. Great. In fact, I want to push this to master. So I'm going to say git checkout master. And I'm going to merge dev into master. So I'll say git merge dev. So I'm not pulling dev into, I just pulled dev into master. If I say git status, I should say, if I say git log instead, I can see Dockerized application as my last commit on master. Cool. Now I can just go git push origin master. Awesome. I want to try connecting to my database again. Remember, my database is still running. So I'll go dev@12345. Let's just confirm that that user we created is actually there. Tables, ASP.NET users. And as you can see, we have two users. We have the admin user we create when the application starts, and we have my user that I created. Awesome. I'm going to close this. We're ready to take our application to the cloud now. I'm going to go back to the source folder and just say docker compose down. Now it's time to work on the server. I'm going to open up another tab, and because I'm lazy, I'm going to actually tab all the way till I find my SSH command. And this is not peculiar to me. A lot of developers do this. So okay, so that's my SSH command, SSH Ubuntu at, and now I want to go into my server and actually run this on the server. Great. So I'm back in the server. That command, I noticed I was using a lot of memory, so I just wanted to go in and see what was consuming my memory. Okay, Docker is using quite an amount of memory. You don't have to type that. I just need to see why I was using 26% of my memory. Anyways, I'll clear this. I want to create a folder here, so I could put my project here, but I like to put my project in a subdirectory. I'm going to use mkdir make del. I'm going to create a folder called repos. And now, how do I get my application into the server? There are different ways to get it, but we're going to do the simplest now, and we're simply going to pull it in. I'm going to go to github.com. I'm going to open up Estate app, and we're on the master branch. We just dockerize the application, so I'm going to click here. I'll switch to HTTPS. You should use HTTPS there. I'll just say copy this link. Then I can come to my folder, to my server, and say git clone this URL. Cloned it, cd estate app ls, and I need to go into the source folder ls. I have my Docker file there. Now, what do I need to do to run it on server? Simple. Docker compose up -d. Hopefully this should run no problem. Sometimes there's very slight changes you need to make when you're running applications on local with Docker locally and on the server. But it's generally usually very straightforward. So it's pulling SQL Server now. So we just pulled SQL Server, we're pulling, and you can see how fast the network is here because it's in the server. This is not my system. It's a server in AWS data center, and the network there should be fast. So we're building the project now. We're now building the app. This is taking a while. Awesome. So we've created the two images and they're running. I'm going to clear this, and if I say docker ps, remember our application is going to fail a number of times. Oh, SQL Server is restarting. That's weird. So SQL Server is not running correctly, which did not happen locally. Docker logs SQL Server. Let's see what the problem is. This. Oh, okay. So unfortunately, we don't have enough RAM on this machine. So SQL Server is saying, hey, I need more RAM to run. So that's a problem. I usually don't create these small machines, but one thing we can do is to just say, I'm going to go ahead and say docker compose down to stop both machines. I'm going to stop both machines with docker compose down, and I'm actually going to go ahead and stop the virtual machine and increase the RAM. And I'm going to come in here, come to instances. This is the virtual machine here. So I'll just click here. So this is it here. So I'm going to say actions, instance state, stop. Yes, stop. So I'm literally turning off the virtual machine. Let's wait for it to stop, and then I'm going to increase the size. And let's say the minimum for my SQL. My SQL on Linux system requirements. Let's say the minimum system requirement for my SQL. Now my SQL requires at least 2 gigs of RAM too. So that's a bummer. So let's just bump this up to 2 gigs of RAM. Action, instance settings. Come to instance setting and come to change instance type. Now we're changing from a T2 micro to let's see, instance sizes. So I need to confirm the sizes. So the A1 medium has 2 gigs of RAM. I think I'm going to pick this. A1 medium has 2 gigs of RAM. So let's just change this to, it's not listed here. Let's look at the M series. Let's look at the T series. So T2 small has 2 gigs of RAM. So let's change it to T2 small. Or rather T3 small. Let's change it to T3 small. T3 small and say apply. So we're changing the amount of RAM on this virtual machine. After changing it, we can then go ahead and say instance state start. And this is the thing I told you. The required is now. Please check the documentation. Let's change it to something else. Instance settings. Let's change it to T3 medium and see, that's weird. let's see, change AWS VM from T3 from free tier. Let's see. I think this is for Windows. Let's just try changing it to something really large, see if we can change it. To medium. I'm going to go ahead and try to start this again. Yes, I want to start it. The requested configuration is currently not supported. Please check the documentation. That's really weird. Anyways, so I'm going to stop this video here. But at least you know how to create a VM in AWS. So if you run into this issue, one thing you can do is you can delete this virtual machine. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to delete this virtual machine. So I'm going to say terminate. So this deletes the virtual machine, and then you can go back and actually create. So just follow all the steps we followed and create a larger virtual machine. If you don't want to do that, I'm going to find an alternative, maybe DigitalOcean or one of those platforms that give you some free free VM, because we can't use AWS because then we need space for our database, right? So you can create a larger VM. You can try creating a VM that's like probably 4 gigs in size or 3 gigs. Well, I'm going to just look around, and if there's an alternative, then we're going to use that. But the general idea is that if our application had run successfully, we'll be able to take this IP address and just put it in our browser and post, because we know it's running on port 5001, and we'll give it to anyone and they would be able to access our application from anywhere. I'm going to do a follow-up video where I actually do that. I'm going to have to stop this video here. Thank you guys. I hope you learned some things about Docker and the cloud and hosting and all of that. I'll talk to you guys in the next video.